Hey, what's up YouTube? I hope y'all had a chance to check out yesterday's discussion going over my top 5 favorite soft plastic fishing lures. If you hadn't yet, you could do so by clicking this link up here. But today we're going to talk about my favorite jigs. Here in Florida, I fish jigs a lot. I'm either pitching them on outside Kissimmee grass lines, reed heads, or lily pads, or I'm throwing a swim jig. Here in Florida, people put together some giant bags throwing swim jigs. Now before I get started, I just want to add that everything I'm talking about this week and today is not a pro staff endorsement. So I'm going to put a disclaimer like right here that says I am not pro staff, not endorsement, not getting any type of financial kickbacks by telling you guys about this. Just know I'm trying to help you guys out, and I feel confident telling you guys to go get this stuff because I know it's quality made product. It puts big fish in the boat, and I know y'all are going to like it. So let's get to talking about jigs. Alright guys, so listen, if I'm going to talk about jigs, I think I need to talk about like how I came about finding who I personally think makes the best jig. Okay, so about 4 or 5 years ago, I fished a place called Holiday Park. If you don't know much about Holiday Park, it's pretty much a jig flipping fisherman's like dream. Okay, you have miles and miles and miles of lily pads with just a ton of 6 to 8 pound fish stacked up in them, and you could go down the bank and catch giant bags off of black and blue jigs. Okay, so when I first started fishing out there, if you weren't fishing and pitching jigs, you were pretty much just donating. So I had to really learn pretty quick on how to fish these things. And when I first started out, I was using the Strike King Hack Attack flipping jig. And honestly guys, great jig, and you can buy them anywhere around the country. Bass Pro Shops, Tackle Warehouse, I'm sure they're at Cabela's. Anywhere you can buy these jigs, and they have a stout hook. They really come through the vegetation well. However, when all I was doing was fishing lily pads pretty much 8 hours a day, every single day of the week, I noticed that I was getting hung up on lily pad stems probably like once every like 10 pitches. Okay, not really a big deal, but when you're doing it every day and when you're doing it for 8 hours a day at a time, that getting hung up really gets annoying fast, which is how I found this new company. Well, it's not new now, but at the time, it was a new jig to me, and that was, and everyone knows in Florida, the Medlock flipping jig. So let's talk about the Medlock. Alright, so what I have here is the original Medlock flipping jig. As you can see, Joe Medlock, I guess, and his dad are like the founders of this double weed guard on these jigs. And basically here in Florida, guys, as I'm sure you're aware, all we really do is fish vegetation. I can pitch these jigs all day long into lily pad clumps, outside Kissimmee grass lines, reed heads. It doesn't matter, guys. This is, I mean, it's very rare that this thing gets hung up. They're talking about going from fishing and getting hung up maybe 20 times a day to now getting hung up maybe once or twice a day, which makes your fishing trip that much more enjoyable and makes you able to more proficiently cover water. And I'll tell you what, the giant bass down here in Florida love a Medlock jig. And you know what? This year, Joe Medlock and his dad only improved their jig, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. Alright guys, so now I'm going to talk about the new Medlock flipping jig. As you can see, I mean, I already have it tied on my rod. I was just using it on Lake Kissimmee last week. Did pretty good. It seems like the fish are starting to move to the outside grass. I'm starting to be able to jack them on a jig again, just like what I love to do. It's only going to get better here soon. And this new jig that Joe Medlock has come out with is pretty much the same jig. It has the same weed guard as this other jig. However, this one he calls the weed beater, and this jig, it seems like it's a weed eater strand, like the cord that cuts the grass on a weed eater. You have the two little double weed eater guards here, and it seems like he's wrapped it in like black shrink wrap or whatever the heck this is. It provides just enough flexibility to where you could always set the hook and get that fish very deep in that fish's mouth, and it has just enough to where it's always coming through the grass efficiently and it never gets hung up, guys. So now I'm going to talk about my jig flipping setup. What rods I use, what line, what reels. Let's get to it. Alright guys, so this is my jig flipping rod. This is my jig flipping setup. It seems like the 7-9 5-power rod is just like the ideal, I mean personally, this is my opinion, the ideal jig flipping rod, jig flipping length. I love it. It's just short enough or it's like really stout, so when you flip into like those reed heads, you can get that giant fish out of that reed head, and it's just long enough where you can feel like the most subtle bites. Now I know you guys see all my rods I have lined up here. This is just some of them I have lined up against the wall back here. I use a 7-11 for my mats. It's unbelievable, guys, how only like 2 inches of rod totally changes the entire action of the rod. I mean, with that 7-Eleven, I use it for mats because I can flip into like thick mats and just feel like the fish barely just sniff the bait. I mean, if it even looks at it, you can feel it. With the 7-9, usually you're gonna feel the fish eat the jig. They're either gonna just crunch it or it's gonna feel like just you're pulling up the bottom when you get a jig bite. So the 7-9, I love it. I'll show you all a close-up of this rod, obviously, so you can see it a little bit better. This is made by Witch Doctor Tackle. It's their Hydrilla Gorilla. They call it the HG 935. It's rated for 50 to 70 pound braid, 1 to a 6 ounce weight. I don't know what the heck I'm gonna do with a 6 ounce lure or weight, but it could handle something like that. I guess for you guys that like to throw A-rigs and stuff, you can still do that with this rod. Super light, and I'll tell you what, you could boat flip a blue marlin with this rod. The reel I'm using for this rod is a left-handed Abu Garcia Rocket. Now the Rocket's a 9.0 to 1. And the reason I use a left-hand reel, guys, if you guys aren't using left-handed reels when you fish, or if you're left-handed and you're not using a right-handed reel, you're doing it wrong. I'll tell you what, a couple years ago, I took the time to learn how to flip left-handed, and now, guys, it's the only way I fish. I'm a righty. The only way I'll fish is with left-handed reels. And the reason I like doing it is if you think about it like this. If I handed you a baseball and I told you to throw it with your right hand, and you're a righty, you'd be able to a lot more proficiently throw it at a target with your right hand than you would your left. Same deal. If I'm using a right-handed reel, I don't want to pitch to reed heads with my left hand because I'm not going to be able to hit my target as well. Another reason is you're going to be stronger in your dominant arm. So I'm going to be able to pitch it right exactly where I want it. You're going to be able to use your dominant, stronger arm to set the hook and jack them out. And then the reeling is just something you're gonna have to just get used to, and I promise once you do it for a month or so, it's gonna be second nature. You're not even gonna think about it anymore. It's not even gonna feel weird to you. And the reason I use the 9.0 to 1 gear ratio reel, guys, is when you're flipping jigs, when you're punching mats, you wanna be able to cover water fastly, efficiently. I wanna be able to pitch this jig into a piece of cover, hop it once or twice, pick it right out and throw it to the next piece of cover without it skipping the line, without having to reel up, tons of time. It just takes you no time to reel this line in and you're on to the next piece of cover, okay? So I'm using this particular rod, I'm using 80-pound braid. This braid is not Suffix 832, however, I highly recommend Suffix 832. This is a new braid that I'm buying from Witch Doctor Tackle. They sell it in bulk. I literally bought 500 yards of this stuff for 40 bucks. It's black. It's pretty much the same type of line as let's say the Fitzgerald Versa line. Seems to be like the same type of line. And I'll tell you this much, I don't care if they say it's black line, it's gonna fade. As you can see here, it's turned a little bit gray in my spool. Not really a big deal, but that's just what I'm using now. It's strong as, it's not breaking, guys. And I can't say enough good things about this line. So between the Suffix 832 and this stuff, I highly recommend it. It's just what I like to use. So that's my jig flipping setup, guys. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Leave some comments down below, guys. Let me know what's your favorite jigs. What's your jig flipping setup? I'd love to know. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about flipping hooks. So we'll see you Wednesday.